Hey all, this should be a pretty quick one. What I wanted to do here was I wanted to organize the sidebar a little bit, and these names here coming from the data frame, I just wanted to display them a little bit more neatly to the user. So this tab here, this will give you an idea of like what we're going for. See, the names look a little bit nicer. The sidebar has a little bit more of a flow. So we'll take advantage of a couple Streamlit features to be able to do that. So let's get into it. Before going further, I did notice one thing in one of my last videos. So I'll demonstrate it here. So if you set this to a run 5K, it's measured in seconds here, so a 5K is beyond 1,000 seconds for a lot of people, but if you try to set it to like 1001, then that's not going to work. And that's because the y-axis is set at a max of 1000. So because we're using positional parameters here, this first parameter is the label, second is the minimum value, third is the max value, and fourth is the value. So I was kind of getting it confused here too. So what I want to do is I want to kind of rename these to be value equals 0. And then because I'm using name parameters now, I can use whatever kind of order that I want. So I'll use a value and the minimum value here. And then I'll just set these here. I don't really want a max value on these. I do want to set this to be 1,000 for each one, which is fine for now. Okay, and then let's just take a look at that. Okay. So if we check out the distribution, you see there are a lot more in the run mean. There's also an outlier over there, so we can go ahead and remove that. But that's all I wanted to do for that. Now, what I wanted to, sorry, itchy temple. What I wanted to get into for this video was I wanted to kind of organize this a little bit. So just like we're doing, I thought we were doing st.container somewhere. Let's see. No, apparently not. Well, so Streamlit offers, if you're familiar with like how Bootstrap works, you group a lot of similar objects into a container, and that just helps with styling. So you can do with Streamlit, and then you can do container like this. However, since we're in the sidebar, you would do something else. You would do st.sidebar and then .container. And that'll just help to group these up logically. So we'll do that. We'll tab that in. And then we'll do the same thing for the y-axis here. Sidebar .container. And tab that in. Save that. Oh, error here. Oh, okay. So that is because the container here it's a method. So you need to use the open parentheses after that. Okay. So visually, you're not really going to see anything different here. But what we'll do now that we have that organized into a container is we can say just st.subheader. And without using st.sidebar.container, you'd have to do st.sidebar.subheader. But since we're already in the sidebar container, we can just reference it like we're used to with subheader. So st.subheader x-axis. And then if we bring this over again. Okay, great. So that gives us a little bit more of a logical distinction. But so now I want to focus on how these are the lowercase versions as they appear in the data frame, which is kind of annoying. So what I'm going to do for that actually is what do I want to do here? I want to make a mapping of so that you can map the x-axis, so the data frame position, to what its actual display is going to be. And I'm going to make this mapping. I could make it up here, but I want this to also be accessible to the plot over here. So what I'm going to do, what I typically do in projects, is if I make a new file here, new folder, call this utils, and then normally I'll make a constants.py file, and this just houses a lot of constants that I want to reference in a lot of places. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to copy this. I already made something up. So this is a giant dictionary basically. So the keys are these are the lowercase names that you'll find over here in athletes.csv for the column names. And then I just looked at a lot of the data and made some assessments about like what the user actually wants to see on that. Alright, so rather than import that directly into main, what I want to do is I want to also make a function to map that. So I'm going to make another file called helpers.py, and we'll make a method here called display axis label, and that's going to take the axis name as a string. Alright, and what we're going to do is we're going to want to return that mapping where the key is the axis name. So what we'll first need to do is we'll want to import that. So from utils import constants and return, so constants dot, see, we have access to the display map now. And so rather than doing square brackets like this, it's safer to, when you're dealing with a dictionary, to use the .get method. And so what that does is the first parameter is just whatever you're looking for in there. So in this case, the axis name, which is what we would use in square brackets. And then the second parameter is going to be, so if the first parameter isn't found, if you're using square brackets, that's going to give you a key error, and that's going to be an exception, so it stops the program, right? But Here, if the axis name isn't found as a key, then it'll just return the second parameter, which is we'll just do the axis name itself. So it'll just be the lowercase version, which is fine. And then if we go back to main.py here, so from utils import helpers, and then so below each of these, we're going to have an x-axis. We'll call this a display, and set it equal to helpers dot display axis label, and then x-axis. And then we'll do the same for the y-axis here. Y-axis label and y-axis. Okay, so now that we have these, what we're going to do is we'll do a search up here. So we'll say x-axis. And so the reason I'm doing a find is it's just a lot easier to see it in my opinion. So some of these we are legitimately going to want it to be x-axis. But for stuff that we're like printing out, for example, we're going to want to be x-axis display. Okay. See, we're printing here, and we're actually referencing the column here, so I'll keep those same. Okay, and that might be it for that. So we'll want to do the same with the y-axis. So if we scroll back up here, oh, that should also be y-axis display, by the way. Okay, and that should be everything, so let's take a look at what we have. Okay, so age, 5K run, 5K run. Okay, great. So then in plot.py we want to do that same sort of thing, so we want to say from utils import helpers, and then scroll down to where we're actually displaying things. Let's create a little variable up here actually, and this will just be the same variables that we made here. So for the displays, then the x-axis display, x-axis display. Alright, so we need the same kind of thing for the generate histogram. Now this is going to be, we can't use the variables since this is named differently. So helpers dot display axis label and then column. And then also, so we never, Plotly allows you to define the figure and then update its layout in order to put in user-friendly names, or else it will use its own by default. So what we'll do is we'll just copy this little guy right here. And so we will grab this thing right here. And then for the y-axis, this isn't actually something we're choosing, so we'll just say distribution. There, and so that will, so if we take a look now, see distribution of age, distribution of age. Okay, great. Looking sharp. So notice that these select boxes, you're still seeing the data frame items in here. So to do that, so Streamlit actually offers a feature parameter on their select boxes called format func. And the way that that works is it takes in a formatting function that will return a dictionary like we've just defined, where the key is the column name that we actually have and the value of that is the actual display value. So let's work on that. That's actually really simple to implement. So on the x-axis select box up here, all we do is see format func will pop up, and then we just do helpers dot display axis label, and that's because that's already a function, so we can just define it like that. If we don't have a function defined like that, we can use something called a lambda, which in our case we don't need to anyway. So helpers dot display axis label, and then okay, so let's bring that back over. Okay, cool. Now we see actual names that make sense. So we can use the same sort of thing for the trend line down here. Granted, we only have 3 options in here, so it's a lot more applicable up here where we have like 14 or however many options that it is. So for the trend line, let's actually use a lambda function to show you what that would look like. So the way that you use a lambda, and you may have never done this before, is you just say lambda, and then a lambda is just like a shorthand function. So the parameters which in this case is just the actual function name, and then what we're going to do to that, which we have trend line options up here. So we'll just do trend line options, and then we'll use the .get method again because that's safer to use that in case the user accesses something that you don't end up having. We also need a comma here. So this dictionary here is also backwards, so I have the correct version here. which is just flipped everything around. So, well, OLS is the key, for example, and that's what needs to be passed over to Plotly, and this is what will display. So that'll just keep it with what we have for other display functions. Um, so beyond that, also we don't need this anymore. That was being used to reference that dictionary that we had, and then we can just rename this to trend line. We'll just get rid of some of the white space here. Okay, and then let's just bring this over. Beautiful. Okay. So we have ordinary least squares. This is exactly what we had before, just we're using the lambda function to do it now. So that's everything that I wanted to do for this one. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.